Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome home to Torah. For starters. Again, we are still not back in the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. We are in the command center making tzitzis. People are making tzitzis right now as we are giving this class and listening. And I just want to mention that this class is going to be the ultimate in knowing how to win the war. We are in the middle of a war, and it's a secret, right? The secret that we're going to win, how we're going to win. But now it's been revealed. You will find out through the verse that we're going to deal with in Genesis chapter 28, verse 14, where Hashem says to whom? To Yakov, your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall gain strength. How does that relate to the war? Before we begin, I want to show you just one short clip. We'll be back in a minute. How and what we're doing to help the soldiers with mitzvahs, tefillin, and tzitzis specifically. And we'll be right back. Okay, I just wanted to show you what we're doing here. This is the command center. We are making tzitzis for the soldiers. The green ones are for the regular soldiers. The white ones are for the Chayil Avir, for the Navy and the Air Force. Okay, so I wanted to show you a quick glance of what the room looks like.
Army.
Okay, you didn't do it yet? Okay. So this is what the room looks like. This is the command center, and they're being shipped out every day to the front lines. Here are the 7 pairs of tefillin that Baruch Hashem people have donated either money or actual tefillin. We had them checked, we had them refurbished, but basically most of these here are brand new sets, and I'll give you just an idea. And these special cases for the Chayalim, and they're on their way now to the front line. Okay, so now that we're back, you could contribute. All the links of how you can help. And if you're local in Jerusalem, you can actually come and make tzitzis with us on Thursday nights. Actually, every afternoon. I want to thank those who have already contributed. We've already sent 13 sets of tefillin to the front lines. There's another 6 coming next week. They'll be at the front lines. I just want to mention, I've seen a lot of political pundits speaking about the war. Trust me when I say this, you need halacha and you need the generals. To decide what happens in a war, you need the professionals. King David, we learn, the Gamor, how did they go to war? And we're talking about an optional war. Right now we're involved in a mitzvah war. But nevertheless, when you wanted to go to war, what did you do? You had to come up with a strategy. That means you had to go to the generals. And after the generals and you had winning strategy, then you went to the Kohanim and you went to see what the Urim V'Tumim and the Sanhedrin had to say. The Sanhedrin would say, okay. Then you go to the Urim V'Tumim, the breastplate, to find out if you're going to win or lose. So you don't just go to war and you don't just comment. If you're not a rabbi and know the halacha, who also knows and consulted with the generals, I suggest you keep quiet. And if you're a politician and a general, and you didn't speak to the rabbis about the moral aspects, I suggest you do that, okay? The next idea I wanted to bring is that, how do I say this? Oh, it's Thanksgiving. So I want to spend just maybe a minute and a half, and I'll give you some food for thought. No apple, not just apple pie, pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving is a Jewish holiday, and it's celebrated every single day. The very first words in our mouth is Modeh Ani. I am grateful. How grateful am I? What does Thanksgiving, that's what it means, how grateful we are. Now, when not just Columbus, but anybody set out to discover a shortcut to India, and they discovered a new world, that's why they call the American Indians Indians. They thought they discovered a shortcut to India. What else did they discover there besides peanuts and tomatoes and a few other things? Turkey. And you know what? Turkey was not in the Western world. In fact, the rabbis didn't even know whether it was kosher or not. But because it tasted so good, they were forced to declare. No, I'm kidding. Of course, it's kosher. And what in Hebrew is the word turkey? None other than hodu. It's hodu. Turkey is called hodu, and that's because of this. Well, you look. I want you to think about that. I want you to think. That's your homework. I began by telling you these words today are going to enlighten us how we're going to win the war. Okay? And it should be, as you will see if you stick it out to the end, how this could be the last and final war. Okay? Now, back to the politics again. I just wanted, because I didn't mention this earlier, that the politicians mentioned there are two goals of this war. One was to defeat Hamas, and the other was to bring our hostages back. Keep in mind that anytime there's a halakhic issue, there's always things you're weighing. You're juggling issues. So again, stay out of it if you're not an expert in either halacha or in strategy. These are two issues that are very complicated. Leave it to the experts. Okay, here we go. So in our Parsha, VaYeitzei, in chapter 28, verse 14, V'hoye zaracha afar haaretz ufaratzta, and then it goes on to mention these directions: westward, eastward, northward, and southward. Again, and your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, ka'afar haaretz. But then, what is ufaratzta? What does that mean? We're going to find out. And then, if you notice the directions, what kind of directions are these? It starts off with what? West, and then east, then north, then south. We're going to see, I might as well just take you there just to show you, although when we get there, it'll become very clear. Look at number 14 on the source sheet. If you go to Genesis 13:14, when God speaks to Abraham, he gives the different idea. He says, go, right? He said, lift up your eyes from where you are, look northwards and then southward, and then eastward and then westward. It's different directions than we have. And if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 3:27, when God speaks to Moses about looking at the land, he says, go to the top of the hill, lift your eyes. And what are you going to see? Westward and northward, southward and eastward. Totally different than what we have in our Parshat. Totally different than what God spoke to Abraham. So we're going to have to deal with the directions in our Parsha. But first thing we're going to deal with dust of the earth. Second thing, ufaratzta. What does that mean? We said you shall gain strength. We'll see. And then the order of the directions of the land of Israel. So now, the Yakar. What we're dealing with here is the Yakar. Guys, you have it in Hebrew? There you go. So on page Kuf Lamed Vav, 136, the Yakar right away, he says, you know what it should say? Instead of ufaratzta, which is what? Singular. Remember, God's speaking to Yakov, to one person. But he's talking about all of his seed, which is us. Shouldn't the verse have said the yifrotzu? Here, look, it's on this page right here. In the Hebrew? You got the Hebrew there. Second page. Niboyle lamemar. The Yakar is making this claim for grammatical purposes that it should have said, and they will, right? As opposed to you shall, just one person gaining strength, but plural, all of his seed. So why is it directed or seemingly directed only to Yaakov? Okay, that's the first question. And he already begins to answer by telling us there's a remez lamasha amru chazal in the medrash. Now this medrash is in Shochar Tov, Kishahara bo, when paranios, when bad things come, ein margish bo ki'im Yaakov. Now this is in relation to Abraham and Isaac. Yitzchak. Okay, it's in other words, Yakov feels, he's hargish, he's margish, he perceives, he senses, as opposed to Abraham and Yitzchak. And we have a verse in Eicha, Lamentations, number 2 on the source sheet. It says, and he has cut down in fierce anger all the strength of Israel. He has withdrawn his right hand. Right hand usually represents mercy that shielded Israel from the enemy. But what does Yakov do? There's a burning within Yakov. He feels it. He's empathetic, perhaps. He has burned in Yaakov like a flaming fire, consuming all around. The Hebrew is Yiv'ar v'Yakov k'esh lahava. Okay? Yaakov feels it and perceives it. Oh, what about when something good happens? What happens when something good happens? When good tidings or good events take place, Ein margish baki Yaakov. Wow, Yaakov's got the good and the bad down, right? He feels it, he perceives it. And we have a verse in Psalms in Tehillim 14:7. Look at number 3 on the source sheet. Oh, that the salvation of Israel would come out of Zion. And it's almost trembling when you hear these words. When the Lord returns the captivity of his people, Yakov shall rejoice, Israel shall be glad. It's so beautiful, right? B'shuv Hashem shavut amo, Yagel Yakov yismach Israel. So why Israel is Israel? That means the Jewish people. Who's Yakov? Yakov is just Yakov, perhaps, as the Yakar is trying to explain this medrash. That the medrash is referring to Yakov perceives the good tidings. He will rejoice. Yagel. Okay, so Lakach Ne'emar, now we understand, he's trying to answer, why does it say Ufaratzta? That he shall gain strength. Ki mitzad sheyakov levad margish b'tovotam. It's Yaakov alone who's able to perceive that the goodness for the Jewish people. L'chak doimek iluhu haporates. Now I had a little trouble, and perhaps we can have some help here. Porates usually is like the one who breaks through, but it can also mean a leader. So I want to make the leaders are the ones who have the breakthroughs, right? The trendsetters, but they're leaders. Okay, that's what they are. And but the truth is, we're going to deal with this as multiplicity and gaining strength, since that's how we're going to translate it, gaining strength. So a leader gives strength to the people as well. The dictionary actually refers to the ayal that leads the flock. So the animal that's leading the flock is somehow called the porates. So this is a gaining strength. Let's leave it as gaining strength, as we see in the English translation taken from the Chabad website. Okay, Ufaratzka. Now, Inyan Afar Haaretz, we do need to deal with this idea. Why are we called, right? The seed of Yaakov is called Afar Haaretz, the dust of the earth. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Ki nirash agalut Mitzrayim ba'o nevuazu. It was a hint to Yaakov, a hint of the future, a prophecy, so to speak. What will happen to his seed in the Egyptian exile? Ki bezman hahu, at that time, our rabbis teach us in Gamor Sota, shayu hamitzriim churshim al gabam. So the midwives were doing everything they could to save the Jewish children, keep them alive. And the land, the earth itself, swallowed up these babies to hide them from the Egyptians. How are they supposed to survive there? Probably very difficult, great difficulty, but just think about that a second. The land swallowed up our children in order to save them. And then the Egyptians, Yamak Shaman, whoever they are, I don't think they exist today, but anyway, they were truly evil. You know what they did? They took plows and they tried to kill the babies that were inside the earth, that the earth swallowed up miraculously. That's what it means. And there's a pasuk in Psalms, in Tehillim, in 129:3. Go to number 6 on the source sheet. It says, Al gabei charshu chorshim. On my back, the plowman plowed. So King David is referring back to the miracle that took place, that even though they tried to kill us, they could not kill us, our babies. But nevertheless, what does it mean? We are called the dust of the earth. It's referring to that. But wait, the verse goes on. Vayu boyim. Sorry, I skipped something. Actually, I didn't skip. Vayuboyim lebeitam adarim. Basically, the rest, if you look at number 5, it brings the whole Gamor. Well, it's not the whole Gamor, but the Sugya in Sota 11a, Yud Aleph. Once the Egyptians would notice them, realizing that they were Jewish babies, they would come to kill them. But a miracle would occur for them, and they would be absorbed by the earth. And the Egyptians would then bring oxen and would plow upon them, as it says, and we read that verse, Psalms 129:3. The plowers plowed upon my back. After the Egyptians would leave, the babies would emerge, obviously miraculously, like the grass of the field. Now, this verse in Ezekiel 16:7, I cause you to increase. When they try to kill us, we increase. Even as the growth of the field. Now, we're going to see it's written one way, but it's read another way. I mean, we understand it deeper. See, once the babies would grow, they would come like many flocks. When you see a whole herd of Jewish children, of Jewish people, back to their homes, we will return to our homes. So in the verse, it actually says, Ba'adi adayim, that you did increase and grow up, and that you came with excellent beauty. However, the Gamor itself says, don't read it as Ba'adei Adayim, with excellent beauty. Read it as Be'edrei Adarim, as many flocks, meaning increase. So we can use the word Ufalatzta, again, back to this idea of many, increase to many. So let's go back to where we left off in the Yakar. We're like 3 lines down in the second paragraph. Nimsa shasiba rebuim hoya, the reason for the increase. Ba'avor shayu ka'afar ha'aretz shechorshim al gaba. The reason for the increase is because we, and I'm going to use the word in our humility and our anava, we lowered ourselves like the dust of the earth, that they went ahead and they plowed over our backs. Kach chorshu al gaba. They plowed on our backs, and it's for this very reason. Yigdu larov bekerev haaretz mamish, that we increase so much. Yigdu larov, within the earth we increase so much. Vayu kolkach rabim achai behem kedei chaluka la'arba degalim lekol ruach. So much did we increase that when we were in the desert, you know how many people were? We weren't 600,000. We were like 3 million. And unfortunately, 4/5 of us died on the way out of Egypt before we even had a chance to leave. In the 9th plague of darkness. Okay? So it was amazing that in this encampment, right, even though you had 4 sides to the encampment, there were 3 tribes on each side. Each tribe had a flag, but each side had a flag. So you had basically 4 flags on each side, even though you had 3 tribes. Okay, so in other words, each tribe had its own flag, and each direction had a flag. So that's what he means here. You had la'arba degalim l'kol ruach. And he's claiming here that's what it means when it says in our verse that you will expand, you'll grow strength in all these directions. Now, he takes us to Numbers 23:10. Numbers 23:10 is none other than Bilam Rasha, who's trying to curse us, but actually he ends up blessing us. And he says, Ravava ketzemach hasadeh natatich v'tirbi v'tigdoli. Myriads, he's talking about the Jewish people, like the plants of the field I have made you, and you have increased and grown. Okay, so he's looking at us and amazed, right? How good are your tents, O Jacob? He's trying to curse us, but in the end, this is a blessing. And what does the Targum Onkelos translate these words? Did I skip something? Oh, it says, did I read that? Okay, I'm going to read it. Numbers 23:10. Mi mana afar Yakov umispar et rova Yisrael. Who counted the dust of Jacob, or the number? What is the word rova? See, rabua, a rova, is a square. A square, it basically means like four-sided object. So it's talking about the four sides of the encampments of the Jewish people. So again, Numbers 23:10. I think I read Yecheskel twice, but in Numbers 23:10, Mi mana afar Yaakov. Who's counting the dust of Jacob? It's so much. Well, mispar et rova Yisrael. Okay, even though Bilam Harasha, he wanted to end up like the Jews in a good way. May my soul die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. Anyway, these are his words, and he's referring to the dust of Jacob being so plentiful, but it fills the whole square. It fills all four sides of the encampment in the desert, and that's what Rova. Now, the Targum Ankla says, "May arba shirasa," the four dwellings. Okay, the four directions are the four dwellings to teach you. What's the verse mean? Shezachu la'arba degalim mitzad hayot Yakov ka'afar zeh shakol churshim aleha. That we merited to have these four directions in the desert, the four flags, because Yakov made himself like dust of the earth, to the point where everybody tramples on poor little Yakov, the poor Jews, right? We're not so poor, trust me. Okay, so that's like just leading up, that's like an introduction, right? Davar acher, right? Davar acher, alternatively, there's going to be three deeper reasons. Davar acher means a deeper explanation, another explanation. That Yaakov is being told that your seed will be like the dust of the earth. Bizachut inui. Inui means affliction. On account of the affliction. That you will be like the dust that everybody tramples on. The yifratzu v'yirbu. But what's going to happen in the end? You will expand, you will strengthen, you will multiply. Kikol mi shahayat bi'inui. Because anybody that's in an afflicted state, you know what's going to happen to them? Just like it looks. Look at number 9, Exodus number 1, verse 10. This is Pharaoh having a conversation with his advisors. Get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they increase. Pen yiboneh. But you know what happened as a result of his Inui, his afflicting us? We increased. The women, the Jewish women, gave birth to 6 babies at a time. The worse, the harder you give the Jews, the harder time you give us, the stronger we get, and the more we increase. So that's where I leave off. So that's what it means when he says, Pen Yerbeh, Haya Beskar, the reward for the scheme to cause us not to increase was to increase. In other words, as long as the Jews had free time, they might cohabitate. They come home from work, the husband says hi to the wife, they have a nice candlelight dinner, and who knows what will happen. But if I, Pharaoh, will cause them now to make their own bricks and double the quota, they got no time for that candlelight dinner. Okay. Davar acher, another explanation. Bizchut anavah, on account of their humility, like Abraham. So we're talking about Yaakov's humility and perhaps his seed, but at least Yaakov, similar to Abraham. What did Abraham say in Genesis chapter 18, verse 27? He says the famous words, Anochi afer ve'efer, I am but just dust and ashes. That was the essence of Abraham to a certain extent, and as a result of Yaakov also carrying that same trait, Yizku lifrotz l'kol ha'arba ruchos, he merited to expand, to strengthen himself in all 4 directions. As it says in Psalms 37:11, look at number 11. Now, I would translate this as the meek shall inherit the earth, but I won't, because people might get mistaken by another religion who hijacked our religion. So there is a verse. There's a verse in the other religion that says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." It's like, wow, big chiddush. Well, guess what? It's in Leviticus. So too here in Psalms, it says, the humble shall inherit the land, the earth. Anavim Yershu Aretz. Keep that in mind. So we will inherit the world. We will inherit the land. We will inherit Eretz Yisrael through our understanding of our own character traits and being humble. Listen what he says. Next paragraph. Davar acher. L'fishenemar b'shomrei Shabbos. Do you know what it says in the Torah about people that keep Shabbos? Beautiful things. This is number 12, Isaiah 58. He quotes just 14, but I feel like I want to read 14. If you restrain your foot because of the Sabbath from before performing your affairs, meaning your personal affairs, business, on my holy day, you know what you should do? You should call the Sabbath of the light, the holy of the Lord honored, and you honor it by not doing your wanted ways, by not pursuing your affairs and speaking your words, but rather, and maybe I should read it in Hebrew first, Az titanag al Hashem v'hir kavticha al b'masai. The next part. V'achalticha nachlat Yakov avicha. Okay, so it's true, I read that in Hebrew. Then you shall delight with the Lord. I will cause you to ride on the high places of the land. But if you keep Shabbos, I will give you to eat the heritage of Jacob your father. What is it talking about? It's talking about the land without boundaries. In Hebrew, in Rashi, an inheritance without boundaries. Very important. We are at a war for the last 75 years since the state of Israel over the boundaries of Israel. If we can get our act together and keep Shabbos, we'll have less of a problem with the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. That's my message. In the meantime, we'll continue in the Yakar. So he says, this is what it says regarding those who are Shomrei Shabbat. Those last words, I will give you to eat of the heritage of Yaakov, your father. Meaning, Dahainu Nachla Bli Mitzarim Ha'amor Kan. This is what Abraham was promised, the land of Israel. And yes, I have to tell you, Gaza is part of Eretz Yisrael. Okay? Lekach Amar Shiyeh Zaracha Ka'afaretz. That's why the Torah says that your seed will be like the dust of the earth. Ki kamo ha'aretz shricha lishbot shana shvi'it. Just like all the farmers know. Not all of them do it, but B'ezrat Hashem, next Shmita year, everyone will keep it. Keeping Shmita, the sabbatical year, not to plow, not to plant, and not to harvest. There's many other rules, you'll find out. And it says in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 2, right? V'shavta ha'aretz Shabbos la'Hashem. And what does Rashi say there? Just like we have to keep Shabbos once every 7 days, we have to keep Shmita once every 7 years. Okay, let's go on to the last line of that paragraph. Kach zarcha yishbatu b'yom hashvi, so too your seed. They will honor the Sabbath. They will keep the 7th day of the week holy. And as a result of that, they will expand and have a true inheritance to the land without any problems. Just gain strength. Okay? Now, the Yakar continues. The very first thing in this paragraph the Yakar wants to point is, Ma shehiskir haruchos hamakbilin zeh keneged zeh. I'll translate in a second. That's the first statement. V'lo hiskiran kesidron. Second statement. I think they're two separate statements. One is, notice, why does the Torah at this point, I already mentioned that in other places you don't have this order, but why is it that in our case we have east and west, right? They're parallel, they're opposites. And then you have north-south, right? We see in Deuteronomy that it was west and north, and then south and east. We never pick. I have to talk for myself. The Yakar points out things I never would have noticed in 100 years.
Maybe I'm exaggerating. But this is important. As I said, this is going to tell us how we're going to win that last war, that last battle. Wait till you hear what he has to say. So the first question or statement he says is, notice that the directions are completely opposite of each other. They're parallel in an opposite way. As I said, we started off with west and east and north and south. The second thing he says, they're not in order, which we already noticed compared to 327 in Deuteronomy, as well as what we saw also, where is it, in Genesis 13:14, a different order. So if I don't tell you the answer, you're not going to sleep tonight, right? Okay, so we're gonna continue. So he says, Lefisha Amru b'midrash. There's actually a midrash. Now I want everyone to put their seatbelts on. Ein teshua bol Yisrael, ki im bezman she'ein betachlit hashiflut. These are like very hard words for me to translate and understand. Like I can understand them intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually, how do I understand it? That the salvation to the Jewish people will not come until the time that we are in the epitome of lowliness. Mamish downtrodden, kicked around like a football. Hopefully we've already been through it, been there, done that. Man, do we pray that's the case. Shnamar, it says in Psalms, by the way, this is from a Midrash in Shmos Rabbah, in Psalms 44:26. Now we're also going to read 44:27. So, for our soul is cast down to the dust. Ki shachal la'afar nafshenu. Right, the rest of the verse, our belly clings to the earth. That doesn't sound very appetizing. But wait, the next verse says, Kuma Izrata Lanu. Arise to assist us and redeem us for the sake of your kindness. We're relying on Hashem's kindness. So far, that's what the Medrash says. The Tam Shel Davar, the Yakar is understanding what it means. We're at the very last 4 lines on the first side. Shekol Zman, the whole time. She'enin betachlis hashiflus, that we haven't reached that downtrodden state. As einin toilin bitchunam b'Hashem, then we're not truly relying on the promise and security and faith in God. What are we doing then? We're choshvim b'tachbulot lehinatzer mipach yakush al yedei tachbulos anoshiot. You know what? It's very normal. If we don't rely on God, who are we relying on? Ourselves, or the next strongest person next to us. We're thinking of schemes in order to save ourselves from the trash heap through our own personal thoughts and schemes. That's why, unfortunately, it says in Isaiah chapter 6. Go to page 4 on the top. And the Lord removes the people far away and deserted places. This is not a good prophecy, right? We're distancing ourselves probably from not just God, from the land of Israel as well. Okay? Richach Hashem et ha'adam v'rabba ha'azuva. Why would we be so distanced? Ki lo botchu b'teshuas Hashem, because we're not relying on the salvations of God. We're relying on our own personal schemes and thoughts, how we're going to get there. However, kishiyiru ki azlat yad hishtadlutam. So we see that the efforts that we make, there's no good results coming from. Ein oizer v'somech. There's actually, it's not worth relying on. You know, what do they say about someone who's insane? They try the same thing over and over again, and they get the same results. There's something like that, right? So let's try something new. Let's put all of our faith into Hashem instead of, right? He says, you know what would happen when you rely on Hashem? then our eyes are pointed upwards towards God, likro alav, in order to call upon Him, be'es hatzer lehem, the time that we are really in need because of the pain and the troubles. V'Hashem shomea. I just want to relate, we spoke about the name Yishmael. God will listen to our prayer. Okay? When He or them in the future hold us tight in a bad spot. Now, he continues. Uba'ot ozman, at the same time. Hatashua bo derech bericha min hakatze el katze. He's now going to try to explain why the directions are in opposite directions. And we said already, it starts off with west and east, and ends with north, and actually ends with south. It actually ends with south. So keep that in mind. Here we go. So at a time like this, when the salvation is coming, it's coming in a way where we're kind of fleeing from one end to the other end, or maybe extreme, or here directions. Dahainu min tachlis hashiflus el tachlis hamala. We're going to end up going from the most extreme low state to climb the ladder to the highest places. Now, what he's saying is, if you were an atheist, you didn't believe in God, if you were just looking at nature, just from nature, lo ya'amein, you would not come to believe. How could anybody go in a natural fashion from a very low state to a very high state? Maybe you'll go little by little. Maybe your luck might change somewhat, but to the total extreme, it doesn't work like that in the natural world. Yaakov. That's why it was told to Yaakov in this vision. B'marazu, shalosh malos b'derech lo zu afzu. In these three stages, and we're going to talk about those three stages right now, that if it's true by this, it's so much more true by that. But literally, it's like lo zu. It's not this, so then it would also be true by that. This is a Hebrew phrase for a certain kind of logic. I don't want to get stuck on it, but basically, we're talking logic. Ki mitchila amar, from the very beginning, what were the words? V'haya zaracha ka'afa haaretz. The first statement was, your seed will be like the dust of the earth. Ba'otozman shahaya shachal afar nafsham. That's when our souls are thrown down to the lowest levels. Ba'otozman, and then right away, at the same time, ufaratzta. Then we talk about gaining strength, meaning to say, Ratzal Amar Yalech HaPoretz Lifnehem Lahalotem El Geram Amala, that you will go up, the leader will rise, right? The expansion will go and raise you up and cause you to go above. Now, if someone might say, the Im Ta'amar, if you might say, Afim Ya'alu Min HaShiflus El Ezamala, that if you're going to come from the lowest place to maybe another level, but you're not going to go from one extreme to another. You're just going to move in small increments, right? Liot madrega gedola, to end up, right? People are not going to believe you're going to end up on the highest level. So it says over in Daniel. See, Daniel speaks about a rising, but only little increments. It's Daniel chapter 11, verse 34. And when they stumble, they will be helped with a little help. Small little increments of help. Daniel, that's what we just read. So what's the Torah teaching us? So why does the Torah say Yama v'Kedma, west and then east? Kishnei ruchos elu makbilim. It's true. Those two are parallel to each other, the west and the east. But guess what? They're also opposites. Heim hafchiim. They're opposites. Ki b'mizrach. What happens in the east? Leolam zirichat hashemesh. That's where the sun always rises. Ubama'arav leolam shkiata. And in the west, the sun always sets. What is it telling us? We're talking about the Jewish people's destiny here. Shebizman shia erev shimshon shiyisrael. When the sun will finally set for the Jewish people. Like Rashi says, what happens? What happened in Esther's time? Right? Haman was very rich. He actually paid Ahasuerus to kill us. What happens to his booty, to his shlal, to all the wealth, the palaces? It was given over to who? Mordechai and Esther. So the Hebrew, I think I did something wrong here. I didn't bring. So look in Genesis 49:27 regarding Benyamin. Benyamin actually has the place on the Har Bayit where the altar is. So it says Benyamin is a wolf; he will prey. Prey. Okay, because a wolf is an animal of prey. In the morning he will devour plunder, and in the evening he will divide the spoil. So right in the evening, ule'erev yechalek shlav, and Rashi tells us that even when the sun will set for Israel, meaning when we go down through Nebuchadnezzar, who will exile us to Babylonia, in the end, the spoil will go to like Mordechai and Esther. So we will become quite wealthy, right? We will be raised up. We will have honor. We will have glory. So if you want to look it up, in Esther chapter 8, verse 7, it says, "Behold, the house of Haman I have given to Esther." Okay, so in the end, that's where all these spoils go to, back to the rightful owners, the Jewish people. Now, ba'otozman shti'ah yivrechu leketza kenegda. So when it comes to the sun setting at that time, there's this, he's using the word fleeing, but there's like this running to the other extreme that's against it. Liot kisam kashemesh. It's almost like it's seated like the sun against it, which is a positive thing. Now, if you might come to say shazei dafta imu ruach ma'aravi, that this will be specifically if they would be like the western direction. Sha'ati mashemesh sham. It's true that even though the sun does set there, mikol makom yesh lagam zricha ba'oto ruach ketza, meaning the far end of the west, it comes around and it's east again, and the sun does rise. Kach Yisrael, this is the way the Jewish people are. Bizman shielehem zrichat ma'at, even at a time there's even a small light, because we are the light to the nations, and boy are we a light to the nations these days, for those who have the veil removed from their eyes to see it. Misham ya'alu liyot karuach mizrachi. From there, meaning even though we seem to set, in the end, we rise again in the east. Kigam sham eina shemes zorachat leolam. It's not that the sun always is always in the east. It rises in the east. But here in Israel, everyone knows, and maybe this is like Jeopardy, right? If you ever looked at the roof of a house and looked which direction is the Dud Shemesh, the solar panel, facing, we're in the northern hemisphere. I mean, I kind of gave it away already. The Dud Shemesh is always facing south because the majority of the day of the sun is in the south. It may start in the northeast, right, when it rises in certain parts of the year, and the sun may settle in the southwest. But throughout the day, the majority of the day, the south has the most amount of sunlight. Okay? And that's why in the northern hemisphere, by the way, if you're ever lost in the forest, right? You guys never got lost in the forest, but if you ever did, and you want to just, even if you weren't lost, you just want to say, hey, which way is north? You look for the mold or the moss, because that's less sunlight, and that's why it grows. Okay? So keep these two things in mind. You're lost in the city, look in Jerusalem or anywhere in Israel, look for the Dud Shemesh, which way is it facing? To the south. And if you're in a forest, look for the moss. Okay, let's go on. We're almost finished. We've got 5 or 6 lines left. And then we're going to be stunned by the words of the Yakar. So Kigam Sham Ein Hashem Zarachat Leolam, meaning even in the east the sun doesn't shine forever. Kamo B'Tkufat Tavis. Tavis is going to be right after this month, right? It's after Kislev, right? So we're talking about the midwinter. It's usually January, end of December, January, maybe sometimes into February, but it's hardcore winter. Kach lo tatmid shrarasam. The sun hardly rules, right? There's so much cloud and overcast and rain and snow. Even though in that month also the sun does not really rule. Nevertheless, the Torah teaches us Tzfona v'Negba. The last directions were north and then south. Ki af im yukaruach tzefonizer. That even if it would be in the direction of the north, and look at Isaiah chapter 5, verse 11. I'm sorry, it's 5, verse 30. And he shall growl over it on the day like the growling of the sea, and he shall look at the land and behold darkness. This is not a good prophecy. The distressed one and the light shall darken in its eclipse. So this is like northern, dark, tsar va'or, hashach ba'arifeh. That's not a good thing. But what happens in chapter 60? The whole book, and I encourage you to read the entire chapter 60, Samech, in Isaiah, but I'm only going to take one verse. And what happens later on in the south? Well, let's hear what he says. So the last thing we spoke about was Isaiah chapter 5, verse 30. Ein ba'or klal. It's very dark. Kach yu Yisrael me'edrei ha'or legamrei. That's what Israel's like when we have lost our light entirely. But guess what happens? Misham ya'alu ela ketza acharon shikenegdo. Remember, there's an opposite, and that would be the south. There's a going up from the other extreme that's against it. But he says the last. He uses the word acharon, and I'm stressing this for a reason. Liot karuach doromizeh, to be that southerly direction. But wait till you hear this. What happens in the south? Shenirkra kain al shem dar Rome. We only know the word darom. Darom. But darom means dar Rome, that it will dwell in the south. Ki leolam Hashem zoreach sham v'dar beromo. It's not just Rome. Dar is living or dwelling. Rome is the highest point. That's where we want to. That's how we started off talking about. Chak tatmid zrichat shimshan sheYisrael olam. That's where our light will shine. Our light will shine most coming from the south. And now let's go into that verse in chapter 60, verse 20 of Isaiah. Your sun shall no longer set, meaning your light will shine forever. Lo yavo od shimshecha. The word ba. Remember we said sunrise is yotzei hashemesh. Setting, I know it's counterintuitive. Bo hashemesh means the sun sets. And the verse says, your sun will no longer set. Meaning the light of Israel shall shine forever. And it comes from the south. Rome. Dar Rome. Let's just finish the last thing. He says, the Yeduro le'alam beromo shalaylam. Will dwell forever in the heights of the world, meaning we will cling to Hashem. The light will shine forever. Zehav tacha. Your mamish have to be sitting down. This is the promise. Al ha'geula acharona. This is the promise of the final redemption. There's something to do with the south, the direction of the south. I'll leave it at that. You can think about it. I just want to give chizuk. We should all strengthen our faith. We have to work on our faith, right? We have to work on our midos, right? Elif lamata, that the Jewish people are in a battle. They're sleeping in Gaza or in the northern part of Israel, in the cold mountains. What are we doing? Are we feeling it? Are we doing enough? Right? Every 1,000 Jews that went to fight, there's 1,000 Jews staying behind doing mitzvahs, putting on tefillin. That's why our soldiers somehow feel, let's do more mitzvahs. If they weren't religious, there's a tshuva revolution going on. They want to do more mitzvahs because this is the way that we're going to win the battle, for us to do more. So each one of us, I'm talking for myself, figure out what we could do more to strengthen our own emunah, our avodas Hashem, and serving. But the main thing is achdus. If it ever comes to arguing with people over nonsense, stay out of it. Let it go. Let it slide. There's much more important things to be concerned about at the moment. And with that, I wish everyone mamash Shabbat Shalom. We're coming up to Hanukkah. The light, that little light is gonna give off a whole lot of light. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week. Have a great life. Call to.
Yiboneh,